If you're anything like me and you are sick of the store-bought cheap crappy car ramps that look like you're gonna collapse as soon as you go underneath of your vehicle, or the ones that you can't hardly get your car up and you need to add something to get the clearance for your car like mine, then I'd suggest building your own car ramps that are way more sturdy than what you can buy in the store for probably less than what you could expect to pay from that store. I started by getting 4 2x10 boards that are 8 foot long from Menards. This actually turned into 5 2x10s later, but you'll find out when I had to change plans later in the video. If you have a car or truck that has wider tires than 9.5 inches, you can use 2x12 boards instead of the 2x10 boards for that extra width. I was hoping that I could get 2 ramps out of 4 8 foot long boards with minimal waste. I've never built car ramps before, so this turns into a little bit of a learning experience with a little bit of trial and error. My initial plan was to make the first board at 3.5 feet for my base. After that, the boards will be cut at 36, 30, 24, 20, 16, and 12 inches, where the 12-inch board will be the top of where the tire is going to sit on. We'll go with these measurements and see exactly how it turns out, and we can modify as we go along if we need to. I went ahead and marked all my cuts first on all my boards to make sure that I would have enough lumber, as well as being sure that I'm going to be cutting the right lengths from the correct boards so that I'm not wasting anything. If you go all willy-nilly cutting chunks out of random boards, you might wind up with short pieces and not have enough longer pieces to get all of your correct cuts. After going through and marking all my boards, as well as double checking the measurements, I started cutting all the boards to the lengths with the miter saw. You can cut all these with a circular saw if you do not have a miter saw, but the miter saw makes this an easier and way faster process. After cutting all the boards, I put them into piles of like measurements so that I can keep everything organized. After I got all the straight cuts done, I decided to cut 45-degree angles on one side of all the boards to make it easier for the vehicle to climb up the ramps. This is not needed, but it will help out in the long term when getting the car up the ramps. Be careful if you're using a miter saw, because once you cut the 45 degree, the blade can take it and shoot it behind you, so do not stand directly behind it, unless you like to get impaled by a chunk of wood, which I do not. Now that I have all of my boards cut with 45 degrees on one end of each, I lay them all back out into piles of like-sized materials. Now on to assembling and a beer. I started by laying out the first board, which is your longest cut, and that'll be on the bottom, and laid the second longest on top of that. I made sure to line up all the edges as well as the back of the boards that have the 90-degree cut on it. Once you are sure that they are all lined up, you can throw 4 screws into the 4 corners to secure the 2 boards together. But make sure not to get too close to the edges, because if you do, you can run the risk of splitting the edges of the boards, and nobody wants to split the edges of a board. Now you can repeat the process for the rest of the boards, stacking them up all the way to the top. To speed up the process, I use 3.5-inch framing nails, but you can use screws that are at least 2.5 inches long. Once you get to the top board, now it is time to add the stop at the end of the board so that the tire has something to rest on. I used scrap wood that I had left over for this, so no need to buy extra boards. Go ahead and cut the 2 pieces that are 1.5 inches wide. These I pre-drilled to prevent splitting. Attach the tire stop with 3 3.5-inch screws, and I added a little bit of glue to help them make sure that they're secured and not going to roll off when the tire hits it. Now all that is left is to give this video a like and to try out the ramps. My car is the lowest thing I'm going to run up these ramps. I lined up the ramps with the car and drove slowly up the ramps, making sure not to overshoot them. Everything goes smoothly, but as you can see, there isn't a lot of room for the tire to sit on, causing me to hit the brake abruptly at the top. This makes the ramps tip a little, so I'm going to modify this slightly to see if I can make it so that I'm not going to overshoot them. This was easy. I took off the tire stops that the glue was actually starting to dry on, but they came off with a little tap of the hammer. I removed the top board so that the top will have a larger footprint for the tires to sit on. I then reattached the tire stop with new wood glue and the same screws I used before. Now on to fixing the next issue due to my lack of experience, of course. When I ran the car up the ramps, it's just a bit too steep and the front bumper catches the wood, and it's starting to scuff the paint. It's a good thing that this car is nearing 200,000 miles and it wasn't the truck. If it was a new car, I'd be a little irritated. So I'm glad I'm doing this as a learning experience with this car rather than a brand new one. So I went and got another 2x10 and cut it in half and like before, added the 45-degree cut at one end of each of the boards. By flipping the ramps upside down, I was able to add this to the bottom to allow more lift earlier. Now when I run the ramps up, even with my car that sits as low as it does, I was able to clear the ramp with no issues. So if you're going to build these ramps with a car that is similar to mine, then you'll need 5 2x10s, and the final cuts are as follows: 48 for the base, then 42, 36, 30, 24, 20. And the top board is 16 inches so that there is a nice big top for the board to rest on. I think I'm going to really enjoy these ramps, as they will be safer than my old ramps that were passed down from my dad that were probably 30 years old, as well as not being a steaming pile of garbage like most ramps now are these days. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and a sub for more DIY projects and how-tos. I'm going to finish my oil change now, and I'll catch you in the next one.